can't see a thing through the lights. Inga mana, inga reo, e rauranga tirama, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you very much, Ross, for your introduction. Thank you very much for being the chair of our Finance and Performance Committee and for the work that you put into making sure that the living wage for Auckland Council employees could become a reality. You were really important in that process. Can I first of all welcome Alan Freeman, who's actually now living in Canada, I believe, despite his background working in England. But the real secret is he's a Scot. And as Kathy Casey and John Watson know, great things come out of Scotland. And in this case, Alan, thank you for travelling halfway across the world to be with us. But thank you for the work that you've done. I did call you the father of the living wage, and you said no, it was the mayor. Now, to all our council employees, that's a very good policy. Everything that you want to give credit for, blame it on the mayor. But I know that you worked really hard to achieve that, and we are inspired by your example. And we very much welcome you to New Zealand here in the middle of winter, coming from sunny Canada in the middle of its summer. I'd also like to acknowledge, there she is, Annie Newman, and all of the Living Wage Aotearoa people, because you are the people who have worked year after year to put this issue on the agenda and to make it happen. And I really want to thank you for that commitment. That is absolutely fantastic. I don't believe that we could have done it without the energy and the commitment and the determination that your movement showed to bring it to that point. I have already indirectly acknowledged the other councillors here, Kathy Casey and John Watson, both of whom voted for the living wage. Also, I'm not going to try and remember every member of the local boards that are here, but I know there's a big group of you, and thank you very much for your support, because I know that just about every local board worked hard for and endorsed the living wage. So at that level of democracy, you played a real role and encouraged your councillors to be supportive of the change that we made. Can I acknowledge all of the Auckland Council staff that are here tonight, but also to all of you in the audience and those of you that are watching this online. June the 1st was really a defining moment for me anyway on council. It was when we passed our first budget. And there are a lot of things that you try to fit into the budget. And I guess one of the things that you have to be when you're putting together a budget is that you have to be fiscally responsible. You've got to make it add up. If it doesn't add up, you're not going to stay in your job very long, and the council's not going to survive as an entity. And we did make it add up. And we put a bit of pressure on one or two groups in the community. You might have noticed that the accommodation industry wasn't very flattering in its comments about me for saying, you guys are getting the benefit from our spending $27 million on promoting the industry, and you're upping your rates whenever we have the Lions tour here or the Masters games here. You can put your rates up by $300 a night, but apparently if you've got to put $4 to $6 on the rate as an effectively a targeted rate, but a bed tax, that wasn't good enough. And they were a vested interest group that fought tooth and nail to try to defeat that. But we got that through. We did things that were good for the city. We know we've got a transport crisis. We know that we have a housing crisis. So we are working hard to overcome those things. But a city is more than something that is connected by roads and rail and hopefully light rail. And it's more than a collection of houses. It is a community. And one thing that we really wanted to do in this first budget, in this term of council, was to make our city a more inclusive and a fairer city. Now, the first thing that we did on that was to put something in the budget so that we could coordinate with the NGOs that are working to tackle our growing problem of homelessness in the city. And anyone that walks around this city at night feels the shame of seeing people in the middle of winter sleeping on the streets. So we've started that process of housing first, getting our rough sleepers into permanent housing and giving them the support they need to tackle the problems that they face. That's really important. But the reason for us gathering here tonight is that we voted by a clear and a very clear majority for a living wage for those directly employed by the council. And that was something that we achieved that failed in the last term of council. And everyone in this room, I believe, had a role that you played in helping us to achieve that. It is true, as Ross has pointed out, that when we did the consultation process in every ward of the city, a majority of people were in favour, and not just because of the 2,200 submissions, Annie, that you put in from Living Wage Aotearoa. We actually set those aside knowing that that represented really committed people, and still there was a very clear majority for a living wage, and that was excellent. So why a living wage? Well, first of all, it's a matter of values. I grew up in New Zealand where I believed that if you did a decent week's work, you got a decent week's wage. That's absolutely fundamental. I mean, the term living wage just makes so much sense, doesn't it? How can you have a wage that you can't live on? And as Ross pointed out, if better paid professionals, I was going to say really well paid, but that's not true, better paid professionals like teachers are struggling to survive in our city, what about the people that do the everyday work around the city that we rely on as a city, but who are paid a minimum wage? How do they survive? How do they survive in a community where we are reducing the per capita number of social housing in a city that is one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in? So it is just basic to decent human values that we should be paying people a wage that allows them to raise their family in dignity, to be able to meet the necessities of life, and to have an environment where their kids can grow up and share in the wealth of our city and achieve to their full potential. So the critical argument for the living wage was that it was the right thing to do, it was the decent thing to do, and in terms of the ideology of New Zealanders, it was the fair thing to do, and that argument, I think, has succeeded with most people. But even for those that don't see those or don't share those values, it makes sense as a good employer to pay your workforce a living wage. You know, when I looked at the figures, the lowest paid workers in Auckland Council have an attrition rate of 25%. It's twice as high as higher paid workers in the council. So it means that if we don't give people a wage they live on, they don't stay with us. And we have to keep retraining people. And we lose the benefit of skill and experience. It means that people are less motivated. They feel less loyalty to their employer if their employer is not giving them a wage that they can at least live on. And I think we will see direct benefits for Auckland Council and for all of our ratepayers by giving our workers the respect they deserve of being on a living wage. And we have extended that to all of our council employees who are directly employed by council, but also by our council-controlled organisations. And I know that there is a clear argument that it cannot stop there, that over time we have to bring in the other people who are contracted to do work for council, and we will address that in due course. We can't change the living reality for everybody, but we can change the reality for the people that we employ. And I hope that as perhaps one of the biggest employers now that have accepted the living wage, that we can show leadership in our community, and we can, by example, encourage others to follow in our path. The purpose of tonight is not to hear all that, but to hear from Alan Freeman and to hear from his experience as one of the first people to set up a living wage unit in the Greater London Authority in 2004, Alan. And that is something that was way ahead of us, and that is something your campaign succeeded in a way that now a Tory government in the United Kingdom wants to call its minimum wage a living wage because everybody has accepted your argument that everybody deserves a living wage. So that's a sign of your success. So thank you very much for making the effort to be with us tonight, but thank you very much too for dedicating your life to making a better living environment for so many of your fellow citizens, men and women in your community, and giving them a fair go and giving them the chance to realise what all of us want for ourselves and our families. And once again, thank you to Annie Newman and to the Living Wage Movement. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.